this podcast is going to be, we're kind of going to go a little bit over this ever popular Project 2025. And we're really only going to go through probably one paragraph of this. But if you're on social media, you've heard of this Project 2025, or if you're not on social media and you just have a TV, you've heard of this too, because there has been some commercials that have emphasized this document.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, they keep trying to like make it seem like it's Trump's thing.
Yeah.
But then he like disavows it. And I know he brought it up in the debate. He said like, oh, I don't, because they brought it up like, oh, Trump's Project 2025. And he's like, that's not mine. I know nothing about it. I haven't read it. He's like, I heard there's some good things. I heard there's some bad things. But he disavows any knowledge of it or participation.
But someone on social media was like, hitting that mark of like, this is a Trump thing. And then one of my friends in SoCal, who used to be like the coolest drug dealer in our area, he was like, his dad was, then he became one, and he was super out there, man. And he's been sober now for years. Super cool guy, way smart, just a science-minded guy. Works with like lights and electronics and like with NASA and stuff. I mean, just really, he's up there, man.
Yeah.
Really knowledgeable guy. But he was saying, this isn't a Trump thing. Don't say it's a Trump thing. He was responding to this person's post like, this is a Trump thing. This is bad. And he was saying, it's not a Trump thing and you got to read it. And so I try to bring some sanity to the post by reading some of it and commenting on their comments. And all I could tell them is that Trump's name, I think, was used, I want to say it was like 400 times in the 1,000-page document. Like Obama's was used like 90 times. Biden's was used something like that 90 times or something. Trump's, again, is like 400 times. Now, a lot of the times it's because it's referring to the Trump administration.
Yeah. I didn't read it that close. I kind of skimmed over it, and I don't know. It gave me they put a little of that German stank on there. I was always wondering if there was going to be a sequel to Mein Kampf, and I guess we got one now. What did your friend think about it?
So my friend was like, "Hey man, we're trying to get the nation back to like, some sanity." I think that was his overall statement. So he was looking at it as a positive. The other friend of mine is a female was like, man, this thing's evil. This thing's downright bad. And so it was kind of interesting because the female never was a drug chick. As far as I know, never an addict or nothing like that. And then it's funny, the dude that was the super drug dude who was super out there, just...
Is he a believer now, or is he just like super conservative?
No, he is.
Because a lot of people go like, they can go like one way and the pendulum swings the other way, and they get like super conservative, but they're not necessarily believers or saved.
Yeah, no, he's a believer.
All right.
Yeah, he loves the Lord, man. I've had talks with him.
All right.
And so I just find it really interesting how you really don't know who's going to be for this project 2025 or who's going to be against it.
What did you think?
Yeah, that's a good question. I tell you what, when I first read the opening statement, which is not made by Trump, and it's not made by DeSantis, and it's not made by J.D. Vance, because everybody's all like, the opening's by, and they always, but it's someone else that I didn't quite know.
Because there's a lot of authors. There was like, it's like 4 or 5 pages of just like authors. I'm like, holy moly.
And this is part of the Heritage this is from the Heritage Foundation. So it is a Christian kind of conservative think tank, project, if you will. And every group, every side has its think tanks, kind of those in the background, that these organizations that are putting things together and trying to move politics and stuff like that, influence politics. So there's nothing kind of odd about that. But the opening is not by anybody that I knew right off the bat. So don't think, oh, it is Trump wrote the beginning. But I did think the beginning was pretty radical. And
what, just that one paragraph, or the?
No, I thought the whole thing was a little bit like, if you like, intense. Like, I just thought it was like
very intense,
power punched. Like,
I didn't like it. I didn't like it at all.
You didn't?
It's not that I necessarily disagree with what they want to do. Like, I agree with a lot of their, like, yeah, I do think like pornography is bad.
Yeah.
But I don't like the way they're going about it. And
yeah, and we'll get into that.
All right, we'll get into that.
Because you asked me what I thought about it. And I'm beating around the bush. But I am saying that I felt like it was like a punch to the face, in a sense where it's not like it comes off at all tempered. Right? It came off just like, boom, this is...
Oh, yeah, they're heavy-handed.
This is what we need to change. And it was just bing, bing, ding, bing, ding, bing. And I just thought like, woo, man, that's intense. That's, and if you didn't have a Christian worldview, like, and maybe I think that way, like I think that way is because I didn't have a Christian worldview growing up. And I think if I read something like that opening, the opening 60 pages or whatever it is, and I would have read 2 pages and I would have put it down and went, this is crazy, because it seemed so dictatorship oriented in kind of, this is the way it needs to go. And it was very, it is a very narrow way.
Yeah. Yeah, but I mean, I'm not necessarily against narrow.
Yeah.
I think I'm pretty narrow-minded myself. Like, I have a Christian worldview.
Yeah.
But it's like strange because like I understand what you're saying. Like, if you had read this like back in the day, how you would have feel. But I also feel like the left is just the same now.
Right.
It used to be like so different. It was like polar opposites. Now they're just like, they have the same tactics. They look at the world differently.
Let me tell you, I've beat this drum for a long period of time, that I have always felt that both sides are kind of always do the same. Like, I felt this way when I first came into the church. I still feel this way 30-something years later, that both sides, like you are saying, kind of have this way of going about things, and they will not tolerate something different. And I saw that growing up in my progressiveness, and I think I see that today in the I guess it would be like the Christian right politically too.
So you think you even saw that growing up as a kid from the left? I think, okay, the difference is, I think, in my personal opinion, that the left is more authoritarian now. And I think there was always like this way radical left that was like way radical, and I could see them being like that. But I feel like the left used to be more moderate. I feel like everyone used to be more moderate, and now everything's just become so polarized and so divided. And it's like, you're for us or you're against us.
Yeah, and I think it's because the reason why I think that way is because my left, my dad thought Bill Clinton was a conservative. Mm. Just let that settle in your brain, right? And so my dad was a radical left guy.
Right.
And so when I was being raised on the books that we were being raised on, and the thought processes and the places and the location, it was probably, when I look back, it was probably the radical left. Like, it was that fringe left of the whole system needs to go down. It was very radical.
All right, like anarchist almost.
Well, I wouldn't say my dad was an anarchist, but definitely, maybe an anarchist as defined in, like, if you read Howard Zinn's book on a history of the United States, the anarchists that are spoken of in that book, I could see my dad being that. So it's not anarchist. Like when I think of anarchy, I think of punk music, and I think of like anarchy.
And I always remember like, oh, the anarchist cookbook, man. Like it was like a thing. Like dudes would talk about, like, have you read it, bro? Have you seen it? Like,
yeah,
you can teach you how to make napalm in there.
right. Where I think anarchy, like from what I read in Howard Zinn's book, is the anarchists were definitely against imperialism, and so they were trying to break down systematic, centralized government systems. And so, from what I gather, that's how they were anarchists. They weren't for this kind of centralized government system that's controlling things. And I think over the years, like many things, it's kind of altered its definition. It's kind of become other things, culturally. But yeah, maybe my dad would have been that. So, like when I read this, I agree. Like when I read Project 2025, did you have a definition there?
No, I was just looking. I was like, 'cause I don't know a lot about anarchy. I just remember I read Lawrence Ferlinghetti's "The Love in the Days of Rage."
Yeah,
and it was like about anarchists trying to overthrow the government and everything. And it was based on what? Are you familiar with that book?
No,
but I can't even remember where it took place at. But it's like based on true events of like something happened. I want to say France, but I don't think it was France. I think it was some like France-dominated country.
Okay,
like one of their territories. I don't know. I need to go back and read that book. It was a long time. I was like in my 20s. So
who's it by?
Lawrence Ferlinghetti.
Okay.
He's a poet.
Yeah.
He does like City Lights in San Francisco. He's a publisher.
Yeah. I've
City Lights. So he published like a lot of the Beats and Charles Bukowski.
Okay.
And a lot of the people,
Yeah, that might be something good to read.
It is. It's a good book. You'd like it.
Yeah. Did it say anything about anarchy, kind of the history, the past?
No, it was just really about the movement that was going on there and the people trying to.
What years was the context?
Oh, I'd have to look it up.
Okay.
But yeah, it was like, basically it's like this love story that takes place during this like revolution that they're trying to throw.
Oh, okay. Because I'm thinking of anarchy back in the early 1900s.
Yeah, well, this is like early 1900s.
Okay, so maybe it is during those times where there was what's called the anarchist.
I guess it's in Paris in 1968 Revolution of Paris.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So interesting. So when I read this, it's not like I disagree with the material per se, the worldview. I think all of us Christians, if you read Project 205 or 2025, we'd probably a lot of the stuff we'd be really familiar with, against abortion, stuff like that. It's a little interesting in that it's very political. I mean, the whole document is about how to rule the country.
Yeah, it's like a manifesto.
Yes, it's like a manifesto. Yeah, and in that sense, it's a little spooky because you read it and you're like, man, yeah, is this like a, kind of that Hitler-esque thing where, okay, we have power. Now what's going to happen?
Yeah, and it's like you always say, like, okay, this is all good and fine. We're going to rebuild the world, but what happens when that power's turned on us?
Yeah.
That's where it gets spooky. Yeah. Like, yeah, let's do this. I can agree with some of this stuff, but then it's like, okay, what about when you're in power and then you turn on me?
Yeah, that's it, right? And it's almost like, can we have a government that just lets us have freedom of religion, so we can worship God and not mingles in our world? And you know what I mean? There's like a limit. Like it seems like government is so big that it's just involved in our day-to-day lives. We have to think about it all the time.
Yeah, I don't like that.
Yeah. So anyway, I'm going to read some of this and we can kind of comment on this. And just so, and hopefully you guys don't shut it off right off the bat because you're just like, oh man. or you might agree with this. So it says, furthermore, the next conservative president must understand, and this is in the opening, must understand that using government alone to respond to symptoms of the family crisis is a dead end. Federal power must instead be wielded to reserve the crisis and rescue America's kids from familial breakdown. The conservative promise includes dozens of specific policies to accomplish this existential task. Some are obvious and long-standing goals, like eliminating marriage penalties in federal welfare programs and the tax code, and installing work requirements for food stamps. But we must go further. It's time for policymakers to elevate family authority, formation, and cohesion as their top priority, and even use government power, including through the tax code, to restore the American family. So this is a complete package deal.
Oh, yeah.
Today, the left is threatening the tax-exempt status of churches and charities that reject woke progressivism. They will soon turn Christian schools and clubs with the same totalitarian intent. The next conservative president must make the institutions of American civil society hard targets for woke cultural warriors. This starts with deleting the terms sexual orientation and gender identity, diversity, equity, and inclusion, gender equality, gender equity, gender awareness, gender sensitive, abortion, reproductive health, reproductive rights, and any other term used to deprive Americans of their First Amendment rights out of every federal rule, agency, regulation, contract, grant, regulation, and piece of legislation that exists. So that's a pretty gnarly.
But okay, automatically first hearing. Well, it's not my first hearing, but they start using words like totalitarianism, which they totally sound like totalitarians. Like they're speaking out of both sides of their mouth. Like,
yeah, and that's the problem, right? It's right when you say, okay, we got to do this, and so then you're putting your stuff on everybody.
Yeah,
and that's what they want to do, is maybe put their stuff on everybody. So you're right. There's almost like a feel of like both sides doing the same thing.
Yeah.
Right?
And I mean, yeah. I mean, I want to put my stuff on everybody, but I want them to have free will to make their own decision. Like, yeah, I have opinions and views of the world, and I want to share them with people, and I want them to come to my side, but I don't want to like pull out a club and hit them over the head with it.
Yeah, and you have things, it sounded like there's like, of course there's marriage definitions and things that they're trying to kind of get that out of. I would imagine that at this point in the country, if you were going to do this, it would be like a dictatorship. You would have to have all three branches of the government and the judicial, everything, to be on the page, to be able to get out all these words, to say, hey, scratch every document that has a law or anything with any of these words. Like we got to get that out. Like, how does that work? Like, how can that work? It seems really like an overwhelming task.
I don't know. That's like some like 1984 type stuff, man. Like, yeah, it's like crazy to me. It's crazy. And I was surprised you said like, this is all like Christian think tanks.
Yeah.
Because, okay, I didn't read much of it. I kind of skimmed through it, and I didn't hear any Jesus talk in there.
Right. It's
so
not
where's the Jesus talk? Because like that's what we need. That's what's going to change people. You got to change your heart. Like I can force you to do something, but if your heart isn't change, like what's the point? So now you don't say transgender or do this or do that, but inside you're still all gross and yuck. Like who cares then? Who cares?
Yeah. Well, that's it's awesome. I love hearing that. And there are Christian think tanks that basically are not, in the sense preaching the gospel, but they are utilizing Christian beliefs.
Then are they even Christian? I would argue, are they even Christian?
The people?
Yes.
The people claim to be.
Yeah. If you're not, yeah, I
maybe individually they're preaching the gospel, but this
gives me like Christian nationalist vibes. Like they're nominal Christians, and I'm on the right and I'm conservative, so I'm a Christian too. But I don't go to church. I don't read my Bible. I have no personal relationship with Jesus. I don't ever pray. I do whatever I want, really. Then it's like, okay, you're just towing a line. Then you're not saved. You haven't been transformed from the inside out.
Yeah, and there's a book, there's a book there that's called It's a very controversial book called Not a Christian Nation. It's written by a pastor, actually. Like I said, very controversial book. And he makes that point. His point is that if these Christian think tanks would be more about the business of preaching the gospel than putting together 1,000-page documents and trying to change the government and things like that, then people would be changed from the inside out, and things would get better simply through people becoming born again.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I believe. I think that's the only way you're ever going to see real change.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a pretty biblical idea, right?
Yeah.
That unless you're born again, you'll not see the kingdom of heaven. I mean, we must be born again and walk in the power of the Holy Spirit.
But even just to kind of we live in a broken world, but even if we're going to try to fix this world a little bit while we're here, we all got to become Christ-centered. If that's the only thing that's going to fix things, not rules and mandates.
Yeah.
It's it's going to take a change of heart.
And I love that because, the gospel is a regulator, to our life. It regulates our world. So it's to the Christian, we don't, the New Testament talks about I'm not under any law. The gospel is the law to me, meaning it's the regulator to the human condition. Why do I not want to murder? Because of my relationship with Jesus. Why do I want to work on not murdering? Because of my relationship with Jesus. Why do I want to work on not being greedy? Because of my relationship with Jesus. Does that make sense?
Oh, it makes perfect sense because there's lots of things I want to do, but I don't. It's like Paul says, the very things I want to do, I don't do, and the things I don't want to do, I do. And that's what I see in my life. Mm-hmm. I don't. It's like this dichotomy. I don't want to do that, but you know what? And I've heard you talk about this before. There's a part of me that likes that.
Yeah.
And I got to kind of look that in the face because I think when I first got saved, I had a tendency to kind of oh yeah, I don't like that. That's gross. That's yucky. But I was kidding myself. No, I really did like that because I was still doing things. So
right.
Obviously I do like it, and that does appeal to me. And I'm just gross inside.
So there's and the idea is what's going to regulate people. What's really going to regulate them. You can go like a dictatorship and coerce people, force people into acting certain ways. But what is the result of that?
And
how does that work in Islam? How does it work in those kind of countries? How does it work in China? How does it work even in the United States when people are forced?
Just goes underground.
Coerced? Yeah, it can go underground. People can become, in a sense, dull. Meaning they can become just almost like they're drugged, because they don't want to fight anymore. The big power structures. I'm sure that's how it was under Hitler. I'm sure a lot of people didn't like what was going on, but what can they do?
Yeah, well, they were socially conservative, but if you start studying up in the higher ranks, the Nazis were a bunch of perverts.
Yeah.
So they're saying one thing in public, behind closed doors they're doing a completely different thing.
Yeah.
And I think that's the way it probably is in most places like China. And
yeah, and it's tough, it's funny when we've had experiments of getting rid of alcohol in the country, and they tried to do it through morality and it didn't work, so they went in and through think tanks, and they moved the government to do it through healthcare, through a health issue, and then the movement happened, and they were able to through law get rid of alcohol. But obviously, it created, like you say, an underground mafia movement, of Al Capone and stuff.
Yeah,
and it also criminalized just the average person.
Which was what they talk about doing in there.
That's right. That's the scary part. So when it goes on and it says pornography manifested today is the omnipresent propagation of transgender ideology and sexualization of children. For instance, it's not a political Gordian knot extricably binding to desperate claims about free speech, property rights, sexual liberation, and child welfare. It has no claim to First Amendment protection. Its purveyors are child predators and misogynistic exploiters of women. Their product is as addictive as any illicit drug and as psychologically destructive as any crime. Pornography should be outlawed. The people who produce and distribute it should be imprisoned. That was interesting. That's the line I kind of want to focus on. I mean, that paragraph.
Really? Because like I got like the first sentence, like I was like, red flag, red flag.
But I just thought like imprisoned. You know, I thought, man, okay, so there's a criminalization of people. You know, so certain laws, if you set up certain laws, you start criminalizing people, right? And it can work on both sides of the political sphere, right? If I don't call you by a pronoun that you want to be called, am I going to be criminalized? You know, is that a criminal act, you know, for me? And if a law is there saying it is a criminal act if you don't address this person the way they want to be addressed, I don't know if I'd be for that at all.
No, I wouldn't.
You know, and on the flip side, you know, people again got criminalized during Prohibition, you know, because they wanted a drink of alcohol. Someone wanted a glass of wine. Now the lady becomes a criminal, right? The old lady who's 85 years old, who's Jewish and who's been drinking wine since she was born, you know, now, or the Italian, right? He's like, I can't have a glass of wine. Like, what happened? You know? And now that poor man, right, is criminalized. They become a criminal under the law. And so there was a lot of, I think, lessons hopefully learned in Prohibition. And it seems, though, that this is going down the same road. Like,
do you think there was lessons learned?
Well, I don't know. I'm hoping there was.
I think there were lessons learned. I think they've been long forgotten.
Yeah, maybe, and that this is just going to repeat. You know, I've always wrote that pornography won't get banned due to a moral issue. That's not how it's going to work. It's going to go through the same Prohibition road. My belief is that it would go through some kind of health issue, some kind of mental disorder issue, some type of this is the effect, you know, and then it would happen and it would make people criminal, you know, criminalize people. Now, let me just take this kind of apart a little bit. It says pornography manifested today is the omnipresent propagation of transgender ideology. And I was like, when I first heard that, I was kind of like, what? I was like, I was thinking, and I've done a lot of talks on this subject, and I don't know if I wouldn't say firstly that pornography manifested today is the propagation primarily of transgender ideology.
No, not at all. I mean, it's like a subset. It's a genre, pornography, but it's wild. It's wild stuff, man.
Yeah, because you know, when you know, growing up, you know, in order to see any kind of transvestite pornography, because the word transgender really wasn't used, it was transvestite or cross-dressing porn or stuff like that. That was a super niche, man. That was like very niche stuff.
Yeah.
You know, and as pornography has become free and has been distributed, and I'll get there about that. Even today, I can't think of just that there's this transgender that, like, when people think of pornography, they see it as the propagation of transgender ideology. I just don't see that the average, if I went down to the college and I just said, hey bro, let me talk to you a minute and let me ask you, you know, when you see pornography, what do you see? I think they're going to say, oh dude, some girl and some guy having sex.
I think, yes, I agree with that. But I do think younger people nowadays are a little more experimental maybe than our generation.
Yeah, well, there's more stuff.
There's more stuff. And I do believe, well, that's like what you're talking about. It was very niche. I think now as like pornography has become more readily available, that like it kind of does like get further and further. Like that didn't get me no more. Like that doesn't get me off anymore. Like I need to get weirder and weirder, and it just keeps going out there. And we got like hentai and all this other crazy stuff going on.
And so let me say this, because I would word this that pornography manifested today in the omnipresent. I wouldn't say in the omnipresent propagation of transgender. I would say can propagate transgender ideology, meaning it could. Mm-hmm. And there's certain aspects, whether it is forms of hentai porn, that is, they have a whole genre of kind of transgender porn. Mm-hmm. And this is not using real people for those out there. Hentai is cartoon porn, Japanese cartoon porn. But they have a whole genre of this kind of transgender looking characters. And so it could propagate transgender ideology, but when it says pornography manifested today is the omnipresent propagation of transgender, to me that's like saying way more.
Oh, it's saying a lot. Like replace transgender with Jew, black, or and how would what and you read that. Even as I don't care how conservative you are, place any other like group in there and read that. And how does it sound to you?
Pornography manifested today in the omnipresent propagation of, what would you say, like black person ideology?
Yeah. That just sounds terrible.
Yeah.
It sounds terrible.
Yeah.
Like they're trying to like come at it morally, but what's your basis for morality? Like, I may get a little more on board with this if you could be like, well, start quoting some scripture to me and like breaking it down. But like, what's your basis for morality? Because I can just start making up all kinds of stuff and say it's moral. That's what most people do.
Yeah, I would imagine their background's Christian and they're trying to, again, influence the government through Christian belief systems, that kind of idea. So they're wanting to break down this idea, this transgender ideology. And they see that it's manifested in pornography. There's a part of pornography, a segment of it, a genre of it, a real niche that has this in there. And I have no doubt that young people today, because of the buffet of pornography that's available, they're able to tap into stuff like this way more readily than we ever were. So it becomes a sexual norm, a sexual option. I've written on that. I think that's true. Mm-hmm. I think it's something that's not spoken of enough. The influence of today's pornography on youth and their sexual decisions or their gender identity decisions. I do believe that when you give a kid the transgender pictures and you give them the availability to see all the aspects of transgender life, that becomes an influence in their life. But don't get me wrong, I don't think pornography is the driving motive for kids. That's where I would differ from this guy or this group. Is I don't think pornography is the move. I think it's an instrument that's used, but I would say in young people's life, YouTubers are way more influential, meaning to the 7-year-old and to the 13-year-old, when they're watching their favorite YouTubers and their favorite YouTubers talk about transgenderism in a positive way and homosexual lifestyle in a positive way, those are the preachers. That is the ideology, the preaching that's going on that develops something in their mind where they start going, hey, why is my dad always, like ripping homosexuality?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
No, complete sense. I mean, yeah, I believe in conditioning. And we see even like Disney movies now. They have like same-sex couples in Disney. They won't come out and explicitly say but they're holding hands or at a dinner table together, and it's in the subtext, and they're not out there yet where they're pushing it like saying like these two are a couple, but they're like the kids are seeing this, they're putting things together, they're putting the pieces together.
Yeah.
And if this just specifically talked about pornography and didn't try to like tie it to transgenderism, I may be able to get more on board with it, but it seems like they have an axe to grind here to me with the transgender community, whatever you want to believe about them or not. And I don't even feel this works good as a piece of propaganda. Like that's what it is. In my eyes, it's propaganda. I don't even think it's good propaganda. It's too wordy. Like it goes over the common person's head. Like I think, we're getting off topic here, but good propaganda is like a World War II Nazi poster. You look at it and it evokes something in me. I can look at it. I don't speak German, but I know exactly what it's saying.
Yeah.
And that's what good, like if you want to make me want some propaganda, like they need to hire some artists or something.
Yeah. Well, good propaganda is like, what is it? Healthcare. To me, that's great propaganda, meaning it's one word, it's one kind of phrase that makes you totally think that the system is for your health care. So
it's kind of subversive.
Yeah, so that's a great slogan. You know what I mean? Meaning when I go into this building, they're all for my health care. Never mind, there's millions and billions of dollars being made, off of us, and off of the diseases and the quote cures. And I find healthcare to be a great propaganda slogan, but I hear what you're saying.
Yeah, and I liked they're eating the pets. Like to me, that's great. Like that evokes an image in my head.
Yeah.
It's, they're eating the pets. What are you talking? Like it's that sensationalism that kind of grabs you. Like man bites dog. Like that's a story. What's going on there? Like I want to hear that. Yeah. Like this is like I don't know. It's too wordy for me.
Yeah. Well, it is a little wordy because man, I mean, even in reading it, and I've read a lot of pretty heady stuff. But when it says like pornography manifested today is the omnipresent propagation of transgender ideology and sexualization of children, which I agree with that. It's definitely the sexualization of children.
All pornography though? I feel like they're trying to say like all pornography. I feel like what I got from it is like pornography leads to transgenderism and exploiting children.
Yeah, I think, and I didn't read exploiting. I read sexualization, meaning children, because of free pornography and its omnipresent propagation, meaning it's available. Any child who wants to or can access it because it is free, there is a sexualization that can take place. Meaning they start at 6 years old or 7 years old, already kind of thinking and conceptualizing sex much more than the prior generations ever did. That's what I got from it.
Okay. I mean, I guess I could see that, but I think, these are just my opinions. I think more like, Freud, like it starts a lot earlier than that. I think kids are like, we're born sexual creatures. Mm-hmm. And yeah, maybe we weren't seeing pornography, but I think we innately knew that like sexuality. Like I remember as a child seeing things on TV and I didn't understand it, but I knew something was going on there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Whether it was like just the way a woman looked or something, like something inside me was like, what is going? This is making some kind of feeling in me. It's creating some kind of feeling. I don't really know what it is, but it's something's happening inside me.
Yeah. Well, this is cool. That's good you brought it up because it brings up another problem with this is when you say pornography, sometimes we have to go, what do we mean? Right? What do we mean by pornography? And pornography can be defined as just any source, media source. It can be audio, it can be video, it can be something else, I guess. But anything that's primary purpose is to cause sexual arousal. Now, check this out. That's a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a lot of material. And you can get rid of, I've even argued, you can get rid of all the human being pornography out there, like all of it, and you still haven't touched it.
Yeah. Because and because everybody's different. So like I got a foot fetish, say, and now we're gonna close down all the shoe stores. Like, like where does it end? Like we're just gonna scrub everything and there's nothing.
And sometimes people don't realize like the way people dress today is influenced by sensualization. Like people, like women and men dress ways where we're much more, we don't wear robes. We don't, if you just think about it, you go to a Middle East country and they're in robes, men and women.
And why do you think that is?
Well, I'm saying it could be because of their law, Sharia law, which very much could have a large part to play in the way they manifest themselves in public, and to not be sensual, to convey a sensuality. Now you can go there. I mean, you can go there. But the thing is when you say pornography is everywhere, it might hit home a little closer than you think. Meaning, is my daughter dressed? Are you saying that my daughter, because she wears maybe something a little, is that because, are you saying that you're going to put a law in so that she can't wear certain things? Or I guess my point is that sometimes when people say these things, they're not thinking about their own spouse and the way we convey sensuality. And if, do you want to really just shut that down too? Because the way we go about sometimes even our dress can be primarily to be attractive to people.
Or I agree with that a lot of times. Yeah, but I think there's like a lot to dress. Like I think it's like to identify with certain subcultures. Like that, I know that.
Yeah.
Like so, and then like getting back to the Middle East though. So and Sharia law. Do you think maybe that's what it's morphed into? But do you always think that was the purpose? I've always tend to think like, look where they're at. They dress that way to protect themselves from the sun. I don't know if initially it was necessarily a modesty thing, but it was just like we're out in this wind and this sand and this sun and we got to cover up or we're gonna like burn.
Yeah, like a practicality.
Yeah, because like I think like I want to show how ignorant I am. Like I've never been to Middle East, but I remember like the old Sinbad movies from when I was a kid, and like you got like these harem like dancing around like I Dream of Jeannie style.
Yeah.
So when did it like the Middle East go from that like Sinbad the sailor and like belly dancers to like what we have now?
Yeah. Well, I would imagine that in their private lives they have a lot of that Sinbad the sailor mentality, But yeah, and I don't know exactly when, that kind of attire became popular and kind of vast throughout the Middle East like that. I don't know if it was the Turkish Empire, the Ottoman Empire, that kind of adopted certain things at some point, or if it was like a more incredible hardcore Sharia religious kind of law that came into place, which I know Sharia law definitely influenced the way the women dress. But I wonder about that. But so there's a lot to it. I'm just saying I'm trying to unpack this idea that when we say pornography, it might be a little bigger than what you think. Meaning it might not just be, the thing on the film per se. I remember there was one model who said, if we get rid of pornography, we get rid of everything, because we become a porn culture. Meaning everything is for the selling, and in a capitalist society like we have, everything's to sell, and sex sells things. And so when you go to a checkout stand line, and there's a health magazine there, and whether it's a male or female on the cover, there is a portrait of this body, and it's not because they want you to buy the product, they want you to buy the magazine, and so there's a specific image that is shown there. So is that pornography? And is that criminal? Is it a criminal act to be portrayed in that picture and to make that magazine like that and distribute that magazine? Are they pornography distributors? And see, some people might go that far.
Yeah.
And be like, yeah. See, that's the scary thing to me.
But then it gets back to who decides what pornography is.
That's right.
Because like in other cultures, like what we find here in America, like on the cover of Cosmopolitan, we're like, oh, that's a very attractive person.
Yes.
But you take that somewhere else in the world and be like, that's gross. I don't want that. Like this is our idea of beauty. So what necessarily would be pornography here wouldn't be pornography somewhere else.
Yeah, and that's I think what you're talking about when you are talking about this is scary, is that whoever is in power, if they start dictating, what is pornography and what isn't, and how this looks, it can really be, it can affect everybody. Meaning it's not, you're not, when you say pornography, in criminalizing it, you might not be, now check this out, you might not be criminalizing the hairy Italian dude who's having a pool party because he's looking for someone to invite to a porn studio to make some funky porn. You know what I mean?
We love the Italian community, by the way.
That's right. Totally, we do. But I'm just making up like kind of the standard 1970s porn producer,
Gold
with the chains on and the Ron Jeremy dude, but thing is now check this out. When you say criminalized, these people should be criminalized. Their product is addictive as an illicit drug and psychologically destructive as any crime, should be outlawed, and the people who produce and distribute it should be imprisoned. Now, this is the crazy thing. Are you cool with imprisoning your son or your daughter?
Well, no. That's for everyone else. There's rules for me and rules for thee. Come on, Bo.
See, this is it. Pornography today is made and manufactured in a lot of ways through amateur production and amateur distribution. And so you have a porn industry. Where I'm from, San Fernando, you have a porn industry. Okay? And that industry is regulated. If you are going to be in the porn industry and have a porn company, you can't just kind of do it. And if you get caught, there's laws in California about that. It's a regulated. You have to pay payroll tax, blah blah blah. It's everything like that.
Yeah, to me, that's another point you bring up that I was thinking about when I read it. Is like it's kind of outdated. Their whole view, like misogynistic. So, and you've talked about this before. So, like, what if it's two girls in their own room?
That's what
so right. Is that misogynistic now?
Okay, so that brings up another point. So let me just finish this point, is that criminalization of people with cell phones. 14-year-old girl takes a picture of herself. She sends that picture to a friend. Friend screenshots it, puts it on Snapchat. Is Snapchat even around?
I don't know.
I don't even know. TikTok, whatever they do. And it goes flying in the space, Is that 14-year-old a criminal?
Yeah, probably in some people's eyes.
Okay, so she's a criminal and she's a distributor of child pornography. So she should be imprisoned, and she should have on her record at the age of 14 that she is a criminal, a sexual offender, distributing child pornography. And what she did is she took a picture of her top side, and thought it would be cute to send it out.
Yeah, some people would say, yeah, like how hardline do you want to get?
See, this is what I'm not sure they're thinking of.
Oh, I can guarantee you they're not thinking of that.
Because how many of all the people that are listed that are part of the 2025 project, how many of them have daughters and sons that have looked at pornography?
Probably all of them.
and I mean pictures of friends or friends' friends, or have seen, sexting kind of texts. And again, text, if primary purpose is sexual arousal, that would be considered pornography. And so you text something sexual to somebody, and how many times is that kid a criminal? Is that adult a criminal? Do we criminalize adults for sending consensual texts to someone? They're consensual.
Who was that? That reminds me of, there was a politician a few years back who was, I guess, I don't know if I'd say he was sexting, but he was like sending his wife. He was a Republican conservative guy. He was sending his wife stuff. It was like pictures between him and his wife. It was pictures of himself to his wife, and somehow the media got a hold of it, and they wanted to like string this dude up, like. And this is like the left, like coming after this dude. Like, can you believe they say they're moral, but it was between him and his wife. Like, but how quick they were to like
jump on him.
Yeah. And it's like crazy. That's like as consensual as you can get, in my opinion, between you and your wife. He's sending his wife risque pictures or messages or whatever the case may be. Like, and they wanted to act like he was a criminal. They wanted to treat him like he was a criminal. And these are the same people that are against things like Project 2025 right. Until it suits my needs. And then I'll jump on it
I'll jump on it too. I know it's wild. So I really strongly, I'm not for the human criminalization of a lot of this stuff that I've mentioned, taking a screenshot. I think they have to, you have to give people some level of freedom in a country to, and some of that means there's a risk of going too far. Mm-hmm. And, but do we want to go flip it the other way to where, you'd have to shut down, you'd have to regulate technology, you'd have to build that kind of infrastructure in a country, which China tries to do and which Iran tries to do, to try to limit the amount of sexual exposure that people have. Yet people are starving for sexual things in those countries. I mean, they buy cell phones, they try anything possible to look at stuff, it's unbelievable. So I'm not sure the answer is all that to try to put the iron clamp on everything. But I just wonder if they're understanding that when they say that the people who distribute and produce it should be imprisoned, what they're saying is that all the kids should be imprisoned because so much of porn is amateur porn. It is not from the big studios. And so, and we're not even counting all the texting or the sexting and the picture sending and all the things that go on in a high school, or a junior high. Are these people now, should they all be imprisoned? That's why it sounds radical to me.
Yeah.
Is like, wow. And then who pays for the government to make this or to enforce this kind of stuff? Like, you have to pay for it. Do you create an army that like a sexual moral part of the police?
Yeah, probably thought police.
Yeah, then it becomes very 1984 and Huxleyan and stuff like that, where it becomes super weird. Now, from a Christian point of view, we believe that in the millennial kingdom, Jesus Christ will rule and reign from Jerusalem, that this is a promise that he's given, and that God will one day reign on the planet, and he will rule in righteousness and things like that. Now, I believe that Jesus can set up something, and it would be a righteous and a just and the right thing, meaning Jesus can do it right. Meaning, if anybody can judge righteously, if anybody can judge mercifully, if anybody can be gracious, if anybody can hold the strong arm of the law in a righteous way and in a just way, and a person who loves mercy and who can do it all perfectly, it's the Lord.
Yeah.
So I have no problem with Jesus doing it. but I just got a problem with us doing it.
Yeah, exactly.
You know? Okay, so let's talk about this other issue that you talked about, it being short-sighted, meaning it talks about misogynistic exploiters of women. And you brought up a really interesting issue that I'm surprised. I am really surprised that this group of people haven't looked into this enough to understand women's part in the production and distribution of pornography today.
Yeah, I don't know. I just get it's like a lot of old people that are kind of out of touch with the way the world's working now, and they're just like still thinking these oh, it's in the San Fernando Valley and we got Dirk Diggler out there, and and that's I don't even know if that's a thing anymore. Is that still even commercially viable to have pornography studios like that? I can't see how they can compete with this guerrilla porn that's out there nowadays.
Yeah,
it's just where you guys live in the 1950s?
And it feels that way.
Yeah,
it feels like they read a book from 1990
or
on the subject.
John McCarthy era stuff.
Well, there definitely has been books written on this subject, but most of the stuff I've read in the Christian world is not very nuanced, meaning I don't believe it's been very thought out well. I've tried to rectify this through, the different things I've done to try to kind of speak out a little more nuanced on the subject to give people different perspectives and understand kind of the more broad sense of the issue. And this is one of them that, there's a part of women's liberation movement that's super popular, that's pro-porn. And it's there's, just so many pro-porn female producers today. I've listed them off before in prior podcasts, but so I'm kind of blown away that, so if a woman depicts women in sexual ways, is it still misogynistic?
If it's all woman owned?
Yeah.
I mean, you can make an argument for that because, we got the patriarchy, man, and the man's behind it all.
Right.
But I don't know. I guess you could make an argument for it, but I don't know if it really holds much water these days.
Yeah, because there's the pro-porn feminist, Wendy McElroy, who would say, hey, we're having sex our way, the way we want to. We want to pursue pleasure on our own terms, just as you men have done forever. We're doing it too. So it's not misogynistic, meaning it's not male, looking at women a certain way. We're looking at women and we're looking at men a certain way, I find this interesting because especially with the amount of women that are involved in sexually explicit material, from younger girls, under the age of 18 to over the age of 18. We're talking about a boatload of people. Now, back in the early 90s, 95, they said 1 in 3 porn viewers were women.
Mm-hmm.
So 1 in 3. So to every 3 men, one of them is a woman. There is some statistical information that talks about lesbianism and the viewership of lesbianism coming from females being totally high, off the charts, meaning a lot of women enjoy looking at other women, kind of thing. So yeah, I just think there's enough information out there. There's enough statistical information to where it's hard to say that all these women are child predators.
Yeah.
And all these women are misogynistic exploiters of women.
Or that even the men are all child predators.
Right. To all the people that have seen pornography. And now, again, when I'm talking about pornography, I'm talking about, hey, why did you watch Dallas in the 90s? Why did you watch Three's Company? And it's like, that's what I mean. It's like,
because Jack was funny.
That's right. It's like, why did you watch these shows? It's those crazy porn people over there. But why did you watch it? Wasn't it because, can't we get a little honest? Wasn't it because, let's face it, you got a chance to look at these chicks, as a dude. And you were like, wow. And there was a little bit of an excitement there. And you would say, and you might argue, well, they weren't primarily, their primary purpose wasn't to arouse you. And I would say, well, yeah, okay, I get that, it's a show, but let's face it, man.
Yeah, it was definitely one of the hooks. It was like they had numerous hooks they're trying to get you in.
Yeah.
And it all comes back to so I can sell you more stuff.
Yeah.
It's like it all comes back to money, so I can sell you more stuff.
Yeah. So all those people weren't, one thing we've learned about the pornography experiment is that you can have a lot of pornography and not everybody goes out and rape people. So not everybody is a child, a purveyor of child predator. That was weird. It's purveyors of child predators and misogynistic exploiters of women. That. So everybody that has viewed, so the girl who's at college who views pornography a little bit, she's a purveyor of child predators, or a misogynistic exploiter of women.
The only thing I really agree with in that whole paragraph is the destructiveness. I believe that wholeheartedly. I believe that pornography is destructive and it destroys us and it eats away at our soul. Mm-hmm. And I think that would be a more valid argument to come do you understand what you're doing when you're taking this stuff in, what you're doing to yourself? I don't agree with the part where it says it's just addictive as any drug. Maybe to some people. Yeah, maybe to some people. To most, no.
I always ask people when they say that, I just go, well, hey, what drug did you get off?
Yeah.
Were you on heroin or what drug? And usually the person who says that statement, they're like, I've never been on drugs. I'm like, then why are you saying that? Yeah. Have you ever tried to get off crystal meth? Have you ever tried to, were you an alcoholic? What was it? I
think the biggest danger with pornography is how deceptively destructive it is. You don't even realize what it's doing to you. And especially if you have no worldview of God, you don't even understand what you're doing to yourself. You're just breaking yourself down.
And I agree wholeheartedly with that. I agree wholeheartedly that a world without pornography would be beautiful.
Without any sin, though. We could say that about any sin, though. Yeah. It's why are we latching on this? Which it should be latched on, but let's latch on all the sins. You know?
Well, let's criminalize all the sins.
Let's do that with greediness.
Yeah. How about just pride? If you have too much pride, you go to jail.
And I believe pride is the root of all sin. I think you can trace all sin back to pride.
But wouldn't that be wild if there was a pride, a police pride kind of crew?
You're too proud?
Yeah.
But then they would be proud.
Yeah, but then it's they somehow monitor you for your pride, and then you get tossed in the pokey a certain period of time. But yeah, it could be all kinds of sins, right? They definitely lash at this one. And I agree wholeheartedly that, pornography is something that, man, it is something that definitely is a corrosion, of the mind, of the soul. It just kind of chips away at you.
It's like rust. It's just slow. And then you wake up and you're you got a hole in the bucket.
Yeah, totally.
And you don't even see it. It was just so slight and subtle and slow.
Yeah, and it affects you in so many ways. And I would agree with that. The issue is that, is this criminalizing a lot of people? And is that what we want? in our life? Is that what we want as a government? To criminalize every sin. And that becomes the best government, the one that says, hey, you know what? Like I said, I don't think human beings can do it. I'm not convinced in the slightest that the human capacity right now as we have it on the planet and that I've seen in history, that when we've tried to do this, we've blown it. Whether it's Mao trying to be moral in China and regulate his citizens, or if it's Stalin or any of these people that have tried to regulate people, Hitler, just go down the list. It just seems like it becomes toxic, and people aren't watching porn, but something almost worse has happened. They've developed, like in a sense, like the Pharisees, where they weren't the harlot, they weren't the whore, they weren't the tax collector, but something worse happened to them.
Yeah,
they became self-righteous, right? And they became, in a sense, resistors. It says in the scripture, resistors of the Holy Spirit.
Isn't it like Mere Christianity where Lewis talks about that, and he says like, these are the, you think being a drunkard and a whore is bad, but you know what's really gross?
Yeah,
the
right.
Pharisees.
Right, the diabolical sin, the pride of them and their self-righteousness. That's how this comes off, right? I think that's what people are getting when they read Project 2025, is they're getting a ton of self-righteousness. So instead of saying like, hey, I've struggled with pornography. Pornography's in our culture. It's all over the place. And me, myself, have had to deal with lust and that kind of thing. It doesn't come off like that. It comes off as like, boom, like, you know what I mean?
We got it together, follow us.
And all you people out there are going to jail, man. Because so those are the big things I was wondering about, is like pornography, like what do they mean by that? Do they really mean, like, they don't really define it. They're just saying pornography, and then they talk about it as being this propagation of transgender ideology, which I was kind of like, I'm not sure where they're going with that.
But I mean, isn't that how like authoritarian governments work? They leave it real vague, so we can kind of bend it to our need, how we need to use it. We don't want to lock it down and then it's black and white. This is wrong, this is right. We leave it kind of, amalgamous out there in the ether. And that way, when I choose to weaponize it and use it against you, it's very easy for me to do so. And then when it's my son, I can give him a little more leeway. But when it's Bo's son, I throw him in the clink for 100 years.
Yeah. So I understand they're coming at it from, hey, this isn't just some, we can't say, hey, this is my First Amendment right to view pornography. This is my First Amendment. I understand some of those arguments too. So anyway, that was my overall impression of the document, was that I didn't feel some of these things were very thought out and explained. It did feel very old. If you say, like you said, outdated. I wasn't quite sure where they were going with the propagation of transgender ideology, other than that I still believe that probably YouTube and YouTubers are more influential in the propagating of transgender ideology than the genre of pornography, of transgenderism, which is still, even in today's pornography world, is still a smaller segment. Even though it's a popular one, it's one that's becoming more popular. I totally understand that. But it is not like, it is not, I would say, so much in the mainstream of porn culture per se. Even though more people are getting into it, searching for it, and those searches are much more now than they've ever been with this topic. But it seems like it comes much more through the YouTuber and the teaching that goes on there that really gets people interested and moves them into these directions.
What I can appreciate about this is that it's radical. And I do believe you need to deal with your sin radically. Mm-hmm. You need to like exterminate it. But this isn't the answer. This isn't not this kind of radical.
Yeah, well, this is definitely, like it says, this is what they would want the government to kind of work on, right? Is, that, like they say, this product is destructive and it should be a crime and outlawed. And then, again, you have to find out what is going to be outlawed. What at what point, and is the Bible going to be outlawed? Do we outlaw the Bible? The Bible has very sexually explicit material in it, and so is that a part of the chopping block, of this? And to me, that's the big concern. Is like if you start outing stuff, then at some point someone's going to read the Bible and they're going to say, and already this has happened many times, and many people are talking about this, right? A lot of atheists bring this up. Is that the Bible is filled with sexual stuff. And it's filled with slavery. It's filled with all kinds of things. People having 1,000 wives or 700 wives, 300 concubines, this whole thing. What about that? What about that kind of exploitation, misogynistic? If you want to get rid of misogyny, right? I mean, can someone someone will make the argument, believe me, whether the Bible is misogynistic, that's another argument, but someone will make the argument that it is misogynistic.
Yeah, I hear people say that all the time.
That's right. So is that what they're saying? Is that what they're saying? Is that, hey, we're going to get rid of the Bible too because it's exploiting women? Because we have women that are concubines?
Like, it's like you said, man cannot do this. And coming from Christians, I would expect them to have more of an understanding of that. The Bible says I can't even tame my tongue without Jesus. So how am I going to do all this? How is man going to do all this if we can't even control our tongues?
Yeah. Yeah. It's to me, it's really interesting. They definitely come out thinking that they're going to be, it sounds like that they're going to be able to do this. I just find it very interesting. So, there's a lot to this document. I would recommend people taking a peek at it, getting a look at it. It is detailed, man. I mean, it gets really down into the nitty-gritty of different branches of government and how things are supposed to work. I mean, it's pretty radical.
Way if you can't sleep at night, just pull this out.
Yeah, totally. But it's been a fun podcast to kind of kick through it.
Yeah, it was. I mean, and we just barely scratched the surface. I feel
yeah. We just went over one paragraph.
Yeah, there's so much. Yeah, and even in that, we just mined the surface. There's so much there to unpack.
Yes, absolutely. You could. I mean, you could take a few you could take a years of podcasts on this document for sure. But again, it's something that comes off, like you said, it could come off very strong. I use the word dictatorship-like. It's definitely this is the way. I do believe that they are trying to get a Christian worldview back into the government and in turn into the society, and therefore that takes radical measures. I'm not sure they're thinking through all these things properly, meaning, again, when they say pornography, what exactly that mean. I don't think they're taking into account the female influence in pornography today and how they're viewing things. And I definitely not sure if they're understanding criminalizing children and understanding the amount of amateur pornography that's out there, kind of the nature of present pornography culture. It doesn't sound like it.
No.
And then they talk, of course, I have many podcasts on this idea of addiction and using those kind of terms of addiction and drugs and all that, relating that. I think that's a segment of the Christian idea of sexual sin They use those terms.
Would you say that you've like evolved your thoughts on that? Because in your book, I read it, and you would use the term like addiction. But then I've heard
like
in your
general
podcast where you're kind of like, I don't really like those terms.
Yeah, I used it in the book just because in writing a book, sometimes like if you like to explain something, it would take almost like another chapter to like explain what how I'm trying to use this word. I used it in a broad sense of just like a habit, like a habitual habit. You know, so in that broad sense of addiction, you know, where a lot of times when they're saying what it says in the 2025 project, when it says it is as addictive as any illicit drug and as psychologically destructive as any crime, they're using sometimes like technical terms. You know, addictive is kind of a technical term that has a pathology associated with it. So just as a drug has a pathology, this is how you recover from drug abuse. This is how you recover from sex addiction. And the reason why I think I've always struggled with that is because in Christianity, we go off the Bible, and the Bible is super pro sex and very pro passion. And so we're not saying, when we're saying someone's sexually addicted, we're not saying never to have sex again. Mm-hmm. But when we're saying someone's a heroin addict, we are saying we don't want you to do heroin again. So there is a difference, you know. Someone who sees their spouse naked and is aroused is not doing the wrong thing because they're aroused by seeing someone naked. So the issue isn't being aroused by seeing someone naked. It's to the Christian, it's who you are seeing.
It's the context. Everything's context.
That's right. So therefore, it's like, I don't like using that addictive term or word because it kind of carries the drug pathology, you know, and it kind of confuses things, right? I'm not saying the same thing to the drug addict as I would someone who is having a sexual behavior issue. Most people watch pornography all the time in this world, some form of pornography. It might not be video pornography, but they might be hearing something that's sexual and they enjoy that, or some other thing. They might be looking at someone in their neighborhood all the time and they really much enjoy that. You know, they might be watching a show that they see someone that they find sexually attractive and that arouses them, and you know,
romance novels
or something like that, you know, and you know, and thing is that, you know, are we saying that person's like a heroin addict? Is that what we're doing? Is that the pathology? Is that kind of this? Or is that what we're doing in the Christian life? Because the Christian ethic is one man, one woman for life, and we're not to deviate even in our lustful mind. It is an ethic that is super high. Therefore, when a Christian struggles with viewing pornography or being attracted to something else, usually we have a lot of guilt. And what we do is we do a self-diagnosis, and we call ourselves sex addicts. Mm-hmm. But it's a self-diagnosis, you know, meaning many people go throughout their whole life every day, self-gratifying, every day. And
I think sometimes
they never think about it.
Using that kind of language can be like a cop-out. Then it's like, well, it's not my fault. I'm an addict. Like, it's a disease.
And we've done a lot of podcasts like that where it can get your attention off of just you being responsible, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and things like that. So, yeah, for those reasons, I think hold to that view, you know. I do believe it's corrosive. I do believe that, oh, man, if we could live in a world without it, it would be awesome. Again, to make people criminals in a society, that's where I'm kind of like, doesn't that sound like Iran, or isn't that a little Saudi Arabia? Like, you know, where if a woman, you know, gets caught, you know, self-gratifying, you know, she goes to jail, you know, like, is that right?
How about public shaming, like the Scarlet Letter?
Yeah,
a big P, a red P on your chest.
Right. It's like, I'm just like, I don't know, man, that sounds crazy. I mean, it sounds pretty intense, you know, and I think a lot of Christians struggle with Islam because of Sharia law and this kind of rule this kind of heavy-handed rule. But it sounds like the Pharisees had their own version of this, and they had a heavy-handed rule. Mm-hmm. I don't know, maybe the Christian right, that are involved, are gonna fall into the same trap. It's just a thought. Maybe that's the trap that's kind of Satan springs. It's like, you guys can do it. You'll be able to regulate all this morality. You'll be able to really rule people right.
Yeah.
And
there's something very satanic to that thought.
Yeah, I know, it's crazy. It's really weird. And, I always wonder if the Antichrist is going to have a purity movement.
It would make sense. It would make sense. Maybe not at first. I don't know.
Yeah, I just always wonder if that's how some people are going to get like, oh man, this is the answer, or this guy's going to make it right, or, kind of thing. And
because like all those like cult figures do that. Like at first they kind of have like this purity sheen to them. And then as it gets deeper in, you got like Jim Jones and David Koresh, and they start having these harems and all this stuff
becomes
is
corrupted.
Going down.
Yeah, Bhagwash Rajneesh and the Oregon back in the day.
And
it's like all spiritual and holy, and then you find out in the background there's always this weird stuff going on.
Yeah, because it's just like, it's the heart of man. It's just twisted.
Yeah, it's, come Lord Jesus, right?